So most of my life, I've tried to do what is right and what is necessary. And in a perfect world, those would be in total alignment. But unfortunately, sometimes they're not. So there are two major philosophers that I think we can look to when thinking about what is right versus what is necessary. The first philosopher is Immanuel Kant, who he wrote this pretty groundbreaking book called the on the metaphysics of morals. And in that book, he talks about this major core concept, which I think he calls the categorical imperative, which is the idea that when we're engaging in behavior as humans, we should only do the things that we would want everybody in the entire planet to do. So we should only engage in behaviors that we would want everybody else to do. That is what he would consider morally right. That's kind of a good of the order concept, but it's also probably buried, probably a little bit the Christian ideal, which is, or what is what has historically been considered the golden rule, even though that has overtones not just from Christianity, but other religions as well. Specifically, ancient Chinese culture also had a very similar teaching in that you should only do to others what you would want them to do to you, right? So there's this concept of morality, which is based on doing things that you want others to do, irregardless of the outcome. So the behavior, you should do the behavior, whether the outcome is good or bad, it doesn't matter. You should stick to your moral principles and do what is right. Then you have on the, not the opposite side of the spectrum, because as I said, sometimes these can be unified. But there was another author, John Stuart Mill, who basically wrote the book Utilitarianism. So there's a lot of philosophy that branched out from this work around utilitarianism. But it's basically the ideal that we should do the behavior that makes us happy. And I think he would also have extended that we should do the things and act in a way that would not only make ourselves happy, but would make a majority of people happy. So on balance, it would increase the happiness of humans, right? So not only selfishly for yourself, but also in consideration of society. Now, these are not opposing ideas, but they're very different because utilitarianism focuses on the outcome, whereas the categorical imperative focuses on the behavior, irregardless of the outcome. So most of the time in my life, those decisions between right and necessary have been in alignment for the most part. But there are times when it's not. And the times that it's not are the most difficult for me to struggle through. I'll give you an example, because right now in the news, there's lots of people getting laid off by tech giant companies. So people are being faced with losing their jobs, and managers and leaders are having to actually make that decision. Well, I've been in those shoes. I've had to make that decision, and it's been one of the toughest decisions I've had to make in my life about, laying people off or firing them or basically shutting down a department or a division. I mean, these are tough decisions, and it really comes down to this: what is necessary versus what is right scenario. Because what is right, the way I would want everybody to always be looking out for the benefit of other humans. So I would want to keep everybody gainfully employed. I would want other people to be looking out for me, and I would want to look out for them. So I'd want to be able to help them keep their job, have employment, and that's what is right in my mind, the moral imperative, right? But on the other hand, it becomes very necessary sometimes for the company to, if the company's overextended itself and it's not going to be profitable, the company won't exist if you're not able to keep it profitable. So you have to keep your stakeholders, your shareholders, the shareholders who put money into your company expect a return. And if you're not able to get a return to them, then you have a problem. So there's a necessity that comes up And in order for me to be happy, in order for my shareholders and sometimes my stakeholders to be happy, I have to sometimes lay people off to do that. Now, that's a horrible situation to be in, but this is where doing what is right and what is necessary are not exactly aligned. So that can be a very tough decision. I don't think that you should make the decision based on one ethic or another. I'm not going to go as far as to say Kant's view was perfect, because I don't believe that you can go into your life and in life circumstances and expect to always act as the way you want all humans to act, and to always act with that morality, that pure morality. Now, I aspire to that. But sometimes it's just not possible, because sometimes the utilitarian view, or doing what is necessary to keep people happy, is also important. So sometimes the outcome is not as relevant, and sometimes the outcome is really relevant. So because of that reason, I think you have to find a balance between the two, because they will not always be in alignment. But finding that balance is probably really critical to making the right decision. You can also look at conflict. At the root of every major war and conflict lies probably this issue between what is necessary and what is right. We're having conflict in Ukraine, Russia right now, and the Israel-Palestine conflict. Or I should say wars, because that's what they are. There's a lot of people are very passionate about on both sides, and I don't blame them. I mean, lives are being lost. This is very passionate. They should be. I mean, seriously. So I offer no advice or guidance on how to make the right decision, but I think I am saying it's easier for me to understand what's going on when I look at it through this lens, and that is, on one side of the fence in a conflict, you usually have a party or a government that is looking to do what is necessary to maintain their peace, their happiness, their prosperity. They need to do something that is very necessary. The outcome is very important to them. Whereas there's usually on the other side of the conflict people that are standing up for what they consider to be right, what is morally correct. And so when you get into that type of scenario, where there's a juxtaposition between those two scenarios, it can be very complicated, and sometimes they're just not resolvable. Sometimes the conflict will just rage on for a long time. Unfortunately, it's horrible. Now, this is why in our society we've oftentimes had these great leaders that come out that suddenly pave a way for us to bridge this divide between necessary and right. For example, Gandhi was a very famous figure in India, and India was having a lot of conflict between this. I mean, the imperialist British government still had colonies during Gandhi's time, and India was one of them. And so there's this colonial type of rule still going on. Yet you also have the rights of the Indian people to practice their religions, be in business, do the things that they wanted to do. So you have a really interesting battle between, necessity and basic human rights. So Gandhi, and then on top of that, which is the same thing in the Palestine-Israel conflict, on top of that you have religious traditions, you have geographical context, you have personal and also cultural memory that kicks in. There's different customs and traditions that kick in. So it can get very complex when you add all that together. So Gandhi had to wade not only the British-India conflict, but he had to wade conflict going on within the Indian culture itself, as well as just exactly how to proceed. And his philosophy of civil disobedience and nonviolence created a mechanism, a valve or release, if you will, for that to be a unifying effect on lots of Indian cultures, even though they might have been opposed normally. It created a unifying effect, and it created a clear path to deal with the British's very utilitarian view of the situation versus most people's passionate view that the Indian people needed to be free. So that created, so his rise to that fame he rose to so quickly, and his philosophy was a perfect marriage for providing a pathway to thread the needle between necessity and morality. So that's just a good example of when we are faced in our personal lives or in our corporate lives or wherever with this conflict. When you have a conflict, you should always look to what is really going on here, right? What is necessary to happen here, and what is morally right here? And people have different definitions of morality. I'm not going to here to tell anybody what to morally believe, but I think I do like what Kant said, is that morality is really an action that you believe that all people should do, right? And so if you keep that in mind, it's less religious that way, so you're not so controversial, but it's still an imperative that we as humans act that way. But yet, then again, John Stuart Mill had a good point too. We also have to act in a way that would bring us the most happiness. And so if you can find out the root cause of the conflict around those two areas, sometimes you can find a path, just like Gandhi did. You can find a path that works for all involved. So anyway, just a thought. I hope that I can live the rest of my life where necessity and my morality are tied exactly together. I really hope so. But I just know for a fact that every once in a while you're going to get caught right in the crosshairs between those two, and that's just part of being human. Thank you.